never really escape your past. That much is true for the Chinese brand OnePlus, as with every new release now, consumers compare their new phones with the ones that they had in the yesteryears. Blasting onto the scene back as the flagship killers, OnePlus has since evolved to the point where I would say they're more likely a part of the flagship establishment than the grassroots movements that they were in the smartphone industry in 2014. The OnePlus 12R is a clear attempt to bring back that affordability factor that the company seems to have kind of left behind in recent years in their pursuit to move up the premium ladder. For the most part, the 12R keeps the core identity that the brand has formed without much compromise. While the OnePlus 12R does not have the current flagship SoC, it is still no slouch as it sports a Qualcomm Snapdragon 8 Gen 2. Our base model here has 8GB of RAM and 128GB of storage. These aren't bleeding edge numbers on the spec sheet, but they're plenty enough to qualify for what I call a flagship level performance. I'm currently on Android 14 skinned with Oxygen OS 14, and it's exactly as you would expect from any OnePlus phone right now. The bones of the experience are quite similar to that of a Pixel phone, but without the Pixel amenities. My 12R's last security update available was a couple months ago. However, you're getting a lot of power to play with. Even though the processor is getting older, you're still getting a brand new phone without any battery wear on it like you would be by purchasing a used Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 phone. All of my apps in my workflow operated like they should on a flagship level device. The games I played on here were snappy and they ran without a hitch. This is basically what I was experiencing as a flagship phone just a year ago. But here's my major issue with the performance experience, and that's with how aggressive OnePlus is with killing their background apps. They've been doing this for years to enhance their battery life numbers, but this time around, I've just found it to be so incredibly intrusive. Maybe I finally hit my point. I'm not exaggerating that the default out-of-the-box configuration of Oxygen OS will kill any mobile game you put in the back burner within literally like 5 seconds. This makes multitasking basically impossible. I can't tell you how many times I swiped up to answer a text message or to even just Google a guide for a quick glance really quickly, only to sit through the entire boot up of a game once again. It's just immediate. So while the 12R can handle everything you can possibly throw at it, can it stay powered on long enough to do those things? Well, there's a large 5,500 milliamp hour battery inside of the phone that impressively charges at 100 watt speeds. It's all wire charging as the 12R does not have wireless charging capabilities. I've been able to get amazing battery life out of the 12R. At the absolute most dire of nights, I end up plugging it into my outlet at no less than 15% remaining. An average day would consist of 5 to 6 hours of screen on time and like 30% when I clock out for bed at midnight after like a 15-hour day off the plug. Those are really strong numbers coming from a power user who doesn't hold back when reviewing these phones. It definitely can hang with me, and I gave it high remarks here. I was also quite pleased with the build and the feel of this OnePlus phone. The company used glass for both the front and the back that is held together by an aluminum frame. OnePlus says my black color is some type of frosted glass, but I honestly couldn't tell that it was glass at all. The texture resembles what I describe as a mixture of like this plastic or thin sheet of aluminum. Whatever the case is with the material, it's not difficult to hold naked thanks to this texture. That's one huge benefit when compared to a smooth traditional glass-backed device that kind of slips out of your grip easily. To seal it off, the phone is IP64 certified for waterproofing and dustproofing. The 12R is also rather average size by current smartphone standards, with a 6.7-inch display size that covers just about the entirety of the real estate. The 1264 by 2780p AMOLED display isn't too shabby to look at. Viewing angles are crisp all around, and the 450 ppi density is in the range of what I've come to expect from most phones nowadays. The screen does teardrop off on both of the sides, which may or may not be a negative for certain folks. I've actually seen a downturn of this trend as many other OEMs have migrated away from displays that curve off on the edges in recent iterations of their phones. But I personally don't mind it, but it does kind of distort a little bit of the frame on the sides for viewing, so I don't really see much benefit from having it. So up to this point, everything I've talked about with the OnePlus 12R is above average. It doesn't really blow me away in any category, but it's an all-around solid performer with minimal compromises from this MSRP. The big challenge is to see if the phone's camera system can maintain that same level of consistency the rest of the phone has. Like most phone makers, OnePlus has kind of designed a camera layout that they've tried to make distinct to this brand. It's a brand image now. It's a pretty standard affair with a 50 megapixel f1.8 wide sensor, an 8 megapixel f2.2 ultra wide, a 2 megapixel f2.4 macro, and the front also houses a 16 megapixel f2.4 wide camera for selfies. Let me preface this by saying outright that the camera quality on the OnePlus 12R isn't bad. You can do a lot worse than what comes from this camera. Let's start with clarity. The primary cameras do a good job of maintaining exposure and focus in well-lit environments. It occasionally gets tripped out a little bit by bright spots that throw OnePlus off its game with overexposure. The camera isn't as foolproof here as some of its, pricier competitors, but overall, I did find that the phone does a decent job at determining what to focus and what to expose on automatic mode. I don't love the color reproduction that comes with OnePlus's processing of images, as I found that certain shades seemed a little more muted than what they appeared in front of my eyes live, but overall, it's pretty acceptable. The low light performance is surprisingly capable. This is what I was shocked about. Certain pictures out in the dark require a few snaps to hit focus and exposure right, but it isn't too difficult to frame a solid usable photo. When you get a picture just right, I think the OnePlus 12R compares well with many of the competitors priced higher than this phone's MSRP. Of course, this is all commentary about the automatic photo mode that a majority of people will use, but I just also wanted to note that the portrait mode is quite terrible. The front camera is also a bit of a little letdown here, as the results are much more washed out than the rear cameras would provide when it comes to skin tone and also, true color tones. Still, I would say that the 12R's full camera experience is slightly above average, and that's terrific value when looking at the full picture of what this phone offers. The OnePlus 12R is absolutely one of the best options for the mid-price tier range of smartphones. It's not the newest, it's not the fastest, but there's nothing wrong with a recently dethroned newest and fastest in a new body and set. I don't find the phone exciting or super interesting, but that isn't the point of this phone in this lineup anyway. You can look at the OnePlus Open if you want to explore something unique from the brand. What I surmise most customers in this price range want is consistency across the board that will get you value beyond your expectation. This was what the originators of the flagship killer did so well. I think the 12R is a welcome return to their philosophical roots, and I do much prefer that OnePlus invests more effort into streamlining their lineup with this phone as their lowest tier instead of, the Nords. If they can even drop this MSRP by an extra $50 and strip anything but the processing power, there really isn't a reason why anyone should not at least look into this phone as a budget champion.